unassuming, friendly man, that you would be happy to know that he was truthful, honest, and self-critical to a great degree. So we come to that in a minute. Shebonti Shengupto is our very prized librarian at the Bengal Club. And we are very happy she's doing the honors with us every time, recording our sessions, which we get to revisit later. And if Gurudash is here, our techie wizard, a big thank you to Gurudash for being here as well. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Choitali Moitro and say a big thank you to her for being here as well, as with all of you. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Julie Mehta. I am absolutely honored that on behalf of the Bengal Club Book Club and the Library Subcommittee of the Bengal Club, its president, Mr. Kunal, then as well as our chairman of the Library Subcommittee, a neurosurgeon no less, Dr. Shondeep Chatterjee, to invite you all, to welcome you all to this discussion today. I think, Shebonti, this is our 26th book club in the last 26 months, perhaps. We've lost count really, but it's very, very kind of all of you to keep, keep us afloat, keep us all fighting fit with new books and new ideas. So without further ado, let's just jump right in and see what it is about the 7 Moons of Maali Almeida by the newest Booker King, Shehan Karunatilaka, so unique. And if I look at what the Booker Committee says, I think it would not be amiss if I said, and I quote, the Booker judges liked the ambition of its scope and the hilarious audacity of its narrative techniques. Chair of the judges, Neil McGregor, said, it's a book that takes the reader on a roller coaster journey through life and death, right to what the author describes as the dark heart of the world. And there, I think, the reader finds, to our surprise, the joy, the tenderness, love, and perhaps even loyalty. So Ian McGregor paid tribute to the refreshing idea of a dead man telling the story of his life. The Booker Committee called it a metaphysical thriller, and Shehan himself referred to this book as a thriller, which perhaps has too many plots, an afterlife noir that dissolves the boundaries, not just of different genres, but of life and death, body and spirit, East and West. Shehan says, and I quote, when I met him a few days ago, and then he repeated it in a public statement, for me, I find it weird. He says, everyone wants to speak to me now. I have cultivated the art of being unapproachable. Everyone wants to know, what are you writing about? Nothing, I want to say. 2022 was a big year after the pandemic, and he wrote the book as the original DNA, and it was called Chats with the Dead. A brilliant editor worked with him for 2 years, polishing it And after polishing it, I think surgically cutting out bits of it so that it would be the current avatar of that Chats with the Dead. Gory, bloody, full of strewn bodies. Many of you have been in touch with me and said, "Oh, what a book have you chosen?" Others have reveled and said, no, they enjoyed reading the book. Whatever your opinion, I think we can't get away from the fact that the story of Seven Moons is stunning. A combat photographer, closet homosexual, wakes up after his death in Beira Lake in 1990, realizes his body is sinking. He wakes up in an astral bureaucratic office where his papers are being processed. He is confused, even the reader is actually, and has no idea who has killed him. All he is aware of is that he is on a time-bound quest. He has 7 moons to find the 2 people he loves most and tell them where his priceless war photographs are hidden. These images would shake the very bastions of Sri Lanka. Karuna Tilaka's content of the brutality and abjectness of being a witness to the slow, tumultuous, relentless war is in contrast to the almost sensual writing style. So before I give you the rest of my spiel, why don't we turn our attention and do things a little differently today? Go perhaps to Parthiban. And Parthi, you tell us what your views are about this brilliant, troubling, and wonderful book.
Sure. So I was kind of putting my thoughts in before coming. And what is interesting was where the book is set in the 1990s, Colombo is where I grew up. The Beira Lake that he talks about, which stinks while you pass, is always, it's a sense overload because you see one of the most beautiful Buddhist temples sitting there in that lake. So you're questioning what's going on. How does that temple exist in that stench? And then you look at the streets that you walked in and suddenly see all the images that Shehan has brought in where the torture houses are. And you think, I thought these were affluent neighborhoods. I didn't know that the torture house probably existed here. So it started questioning those things as well. But yet I myself, I felt that I was in some sort of an in-between as well with the events of the book in the 90s and the events that transpired actually quite recently last year, 2022 in Colombo, where I'm sure all of you are aware of the protests and everything that happened in Colombo against the government. So I was wondering if it was the demons and the ghosts and the ghouls from Shehan's book that suddenly heard of it and then came to dance in the shores of Colombo last year, because it was quite striking, because you saw people at the Galle Face protesting against the government. And I'm wondering, are these the people who perished in 2009 during the Civil War, who said, okay, maybe this is my time for justice. Let me gather Colombo and bring them all to dance and fight against the government. And then I'm thinking, are the demons, like, for example, like the queen, the defiled queen who's dancing, that last scene that we talk about, was she dancing at the presidential palace when everybody is playing the piano and dancing to the baila? And then also, was the demon that was protecting the president kind of maybe was busy with probably a Chinese beauty queen on the side, that the president decided, I need to resign. And then maybe the demon realized, oh, shoot, I lapsed my job. I should actually take the president away from the country, keep him safe so that nothing happens to him, and so that the city, the country forgets and forgives. So it felt very near. It felt very happening today, and but yet I was wondering if there's hope in all of this. Like Shehan puts it at the end with the light, the chapter of the light. Maybe there is some hope, because Colombo, when I grew up, and as Shehan mentions in many of his interviews and even in the book as well, it's a bubble. It's an affluent bubble. It's a bubble that doesn't even know what's happening beyond its four walls. But maybe with what happened last year, there was a burst that happened, that bubble. So people at least know there's something that they need to voice their opinions on. Baby steps, but steps nevertheless taken. So for me, this book was very close, and it was engaging, unsettling, philosophical, questioning. But I really hope the light that shined through at the end also shines through the people that are in, not just in Colombo, but across the world, who are looking for some sort of a validation, a justice, or some sort of a love. So that's my quick summary.
Arthi, that's absolutely brilliant, but I'm not letting you go because I have so many questions. And I think you're one of the most salient, significantly objective scholars that I've talked to at the University of Toronto on this issue when we were doing Anil's Ghost and other fiction by Michael Ondaatje. So here's my question to you. Yesterday, or day before, I think it was, in an interview, Shehan said to us at the Literary Festival in Kolkata, unlike Ondaatje, Parthi, he doesn't think in images. He doesn't think of themes. He thinks of a plot first. And he said that it was the plot that moved him. And if you talk about a theme, what appears very, very important to him now is that the book is about how do we deal with our past, right? So he says he's grappling with it. He says Sri Lanka has been grappling with it since 1983, and then in 1989. And we know that there's been so many battles, right? The civil war in 83 against the Sri Lankan army, the JVP versus Sri Lankan army. And I remember our conversations years ago, the southern insurgents of the JVP against the army, the IPKF forces from India with their boots on the ground. So as a hyphenated Sri Lankan Canadian with your Tamil roots, would you say that these are the kind of outpourings and writings? Even if you look at Shyam Selvadurai, Funny Boy had elements of the same kind of tragedy that befell someone like Richard de Souza, right? And Richard de Souza being an activist, being possibly not exactly either completely Sinhalese or Tamil, but a burger. So English-speaking Sri Lankans were also very much the target. What do you hear from your parents or their generation, or even elder cousins of your generation? What do they think? Do they think we should be having more books that talk about the issues so that we can deal with them? Or do you think people want to forget it?
I think it depends on who you talk to. From a Tamil diaspora perspective, I think there's always a questioning, why are people who probably would have shied away from voicing their opinions, a direct opinion about the war, or taking a stance, either or, would write a book that uses that as a theme that may be a benefit to themselves and might be a benefit in their financial literary sense. But then there are also people who wish that there are voices from either side who kind of bring in a more unbiased opinion of what it really happened. And I felt that's where probably for me, Shehan's book kind of came close to that. There was a little bit like the cheat sheet and everything that he provides. It almost felt like he gave that perspective across the board. He might be writing about the past, of how to deal with the past, but at least I felt he took a more of a genuine approach than a little bit more of a water on the leaf approach that, for example, like Shyam or Ondaatje usually take. And Sri Lankan Tamil authors themselves probably more focus on the Jaffna side of things and the diaspora side of things, probably not a Colombo side of perspective to it, which I think Shehan also brought as well. So I think there is a mixed feeling, but I think ultimately what people feel is there's still a gap in telling the story as truthfully as possible. And I think Shehan's book kind of comes close to that. And I am appreciative of that. And maybe another Tamil person might feel completely would not validate my comment because they will say, how can he say certain things about the LTT or certain things about the government, which they might not believe in. So that is my view.
Great. I think that makes a lot of sense. And you brought the perspective of a pan-planetary attitude to the
Maybe
kind.
the problem only affects us. Maybe it's only us.
Excuse me. Can
Yeah.
you please, Harish?
I think
Can you put off your microphone, please, because we can hear you. So it's disturbing us. Thanks. So taking the point from Parthiban, let's go deeper into the analysis of the entirety of the novel, and then we can turn back to the issues that this book not just showcases, but also tries to deal with. The issues of folklore, the issues of death, which is pretty much a universal issue, and the issue of how we deal with torture, with repression, with discriminatory practices against people and the divisiveness of politics. So Professor Choitali Moitro, will you jump in and give us an overview, whatever you like? And if everyone would kindly mute yourselves, that would be marvelous. So Harsh and Suresh and, all of you are not muted. Would appreciate if you would mute yourselves when somebody else is speaking. Thanks so much. Okay, Choitali, go for it.
Hello.
Hi, Choitali. Hi.
Okay. Good evening, Julie Di, and good evening, dear friends. Thank you for giving me this chance to sort of read this book and share my views on it. I will summarize the thoughts that sort of crossed my mind. First of all, I thought the book tries to understand the value of time and contrasts this with the eternity, because 7 moons should be understood as a slice of time. That is the first point. I thought that how do we place ourselves in a world which is time bound from a world which has no sense of time? That was one thing. And the second point which stirred my mind would be the validity of a heaven, because religion quite tangentially enters the narration. And if we all tend to think that religion offers a sense of heaven, a sense of relief, a sense of punishing the evil and rewarding the good, then how are so many arbitrary killings taking place? And I also thought that the disjointed narrative that we find is so postmodern. It tries to deny any simplistic interpretation of life. and how divisive politics can be, and how power politics plays a very, very important role in deciding the individual's life. The torture motif, which is so properly placed with so many metaphors, starting from the Beira Lake, keeps on coming back in the narrative, which makes one feel that only torture, only pain, the dealing with the human body, dismemberment of the human body can actually be pulled to a certain point where that same human body can also represent the motherland of a person. Maybe the idea of a motherland is a rather old political construct, but I don't think the individual's identity can totally be understood without the appreciation of Sri Lanka itself. So those are my thoughts that sort of crossed my mind. I did think a lot about Discipline and Punish of Foucault and how the body seems to be undermined as a seat of power. That's it.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, Chaitali. So you've brought us, you've opened the doors, made a segue to us getting right into the heart of the issue of the body of the victim vis-a-vis the body of the motherland or the fatherland. Before we go any further, I will have to ask Shebonti. Shebonti, are you there, dear? Shebonti? We need to mute the people who are not muted because it's causing a lot of disturbance here. Nitin, could you possibly put off your microphone? Thank you. All right. So talking about the body and the dismemberment of the human beings that we see, Urmi, can I turn to you to give your opinion about what you think the blood, the gore, and the human body in such pain, how is it being used by Shehan Karun Tilaka?
Julie, I think that, the whole idea was actually, the picture is very gory in this book. And, it has shown that Sri Lanka, though we find it's just a small island nation, it comprises of all people of different classes, creeds, like, Sinhalese, Tamils, there are some, he says that Chetty chefs, then, Muslim burghers and things like that. So it is, I never realized that it's such a diverse population. And amidst that, they have a lot of, rivalry amongst themselves, and it's rich with corruption. And I felt that the way the author has actually portrayed that a dead person is coming in the form of a ghost or ghouls and telling what he has actually lived through and what common people are living through, how he has gone through each and every stage of their, of his, photographing and finding what is happening. Even the ideology that, when this guy who's the leader, some Gopala Mathangi, he was actually trying to make a rebel against Prabhakaran. And then, he had photographed that a girl who suddenly put her pallu in front, and that happened to be his girlfriend. They were all trying to do things in a hushed up manner, and things which were just so natural. They're always trying to hide, sometimes with superstition, sometimes with, light, with the concept of light, sometimes, saying, it has to be whispered into the ear. So what I'm trying to say that the whole place is full rich with superstition, corruption, and everybody has the fear, the pajero. There are so many gundas coming in. Life is very uncertain. And then, when they show that the spirit is actually, they've shown the casinos, they have shown the people who are in the borderlines, the homosexuals, what is their plight. It's a lot of anarchy in the book, I felt. But I also have the fear that, you know, it is actually, I mean, it is increased to a very big extent over there, which has come out in the last year. It has actually sort of the bomb has blasted, as Parth said, and it had happened earlier at the time when the IPKF had gone, and in 1983 and all. But I'm trying to say that I'm always worried that, you know, if you do not have certain sort of law and order, certain sort of system, will sort of devastate the world. And what I'm trying to say, I also feel that if the corruption is there in India, but if it increases to higher proportions, I think we will, we will also go towards that path. At least the less educated people, they will always get compromised, which has happened already in Sri Lanka.
Yeah, yeah. Makes a lot of sense. And I like the way that you brought about the fact that there are people on the fringes. And I think we'll come to the bit about the sexual diversity issue, which he has brought up. And it's very interesting, you know, at the chat with us at the literary meet, he was asked, Shihan was asked. So the biggest compliment you got was that people who read you in the beginning thought that you'd done such impeccable research about the gay community. Are you then gay? And his answer was, of course, with a laugh, as he always is prone to comic, you know, the side of the comic in the most bizarre circumstances. He says, I'm married with 2 children, but that's all I'm going to say. So, you know, I think he picked the fact that this combat photographer was so well known and who was found killed, a real life person, right? So Richard de Souza was a real person, and he was gay in real life. So my question actually now, again, you've provided the segue, and I want to go to Anusuya Pal, who's a regular at our book club and always comes with such amazing insights. So Anusuya, in the book, he points out that there are 2 different perspectives. One is a positive perspective and one is a negative perspective. You have Dr. Rani saying, you know, you're supposed to make your peace with your past life, move on to the light. And then there are the negative forces that influence him and worry him. So Anusuya, would you like to talk a little bit about this almost a morality play of 2 forces against one another?
Thank you, Julie. Thank you also for the fact that you brought up this issue to discuss, because I personally feel that he has touched almost every form of fringe living and brought out the horrors of every form of minority that exists in society. And being in the LGBT community is today in the in the space of conversation, which it wasn't even some years back. And we are finding it quite commonplace that he should be questioned in a literary book club about his sexual identity. And frankly speaking, it is something that is personal to any being, and it's personal to anybody's individual right to be who he or she is. And I personally also feel that he doesn't need to reveal to the rest of the world whether he's straight today and gay tomorrow and trans day after. You know, and I think that is something that we need to understand is something he has touched upon in the book, and I think given space to a gay person to be seen and acknowledged as a human being. Although apart from that, if you think of the children who are tortured in the book and all the other dismemberments that were happening, the total lack of respect for life, and it even right from the very first page, it affects you because you realize that this is a narrative about a hopelessness, about a fact that, you can't just go to sleep and expect to wake up to a nice fresh morning with new opportunity and hope.
Yes.
I mean, through his, he's a very smart writer, and he actually takes you through the realization that no, this is not anybody's nightmare. This isn't anybody's hallucination after a dose of some substance. This is the afterlife, and there is supposedly no escape. And is it only about the lives of these people, or is he actually telling us the story of Sri Lanka as a country which is just not coming out of its hell? And in spite of all of us are surrounding this small island nation, we are overlooking it. We are condescending to send IPKF forces, and we are trying to help. But ultimately, it is kind of being caught in it, a whirlpool, which is just taking it very quickly and sinking it lower and lower. And I do detect a lot of concern in the writer about the state of affairs, and therefore he's holding up this picture to the world. Perhaps sometimes a little more gory than what it is. I don't know. Partha would be able to tell us more whether it is deviant from the original. But it is a sad case to ponder, with the rest of the world looking on and a country just imploding at this pace. So that's my take on the book. It's an eye opener, definitely. But I could do without this kind of a graphic Dante's kind of
Yes. Inferno.
writing style. Inferno, yes.
Yes. Oh, very excellently explicated, Anusuya. Many points there which we will pick up on the way. I'd now
Thank
like
you.
to turn to Anju Munshi, who's a psychologist by training. Anju, how would you respond?
First of all, Julie, thank you so much for recommending this book. I think it's been a very cathartic experience, because I think the book, it offers a mirror to all of us, and all of us see a slice of our lives coming somewhere, from different parts of the book, and they help us see ourselves and our living in this world, in a different manner. I think there is a deep philosophy of life, death, and karma, which is underlined in the narrative of the book. And it is an intense, intelligent interpretation of different phases of our lives, which is sin, retribution, corruption, parceled and packed with political innuendos and social stigmas. There is it's gory, definitely. It's sordid, it's morbid, but I think part of it is like softened and made highly acceptable for the readers, partly by the way it's been written, and also by the sensitization that the readers have gone through, thinking that it's from the other world. This is some kind of a view and a vision from the other world, which is an afterlife, which has been dark to us, unknown, and infinite for us. So we really don't have any way to tell if it's right or wrong. We just accept it. This is a very clever portrayal of, and a huge magnitude, I mean, a big level of wisdom and philosophy by the ghost of a photojournalist, a caustic narration of Sri Lankan life that digs into political history, religion, and mythology. To be very honest, I think it's like a moral compass, It points on particular angles that we need to be looking at, This is not right. This is right. This should have been done in a better way. This could have been dealt in a better way. I should not have thought of it in a different way. I should have thought of it in this way. So probably it tells us to think and look at things correctly. There are subtle and very loud references to the government officials, double-faced, ways of running the organization. There is Indian peacekeeping is also mentioned. The black market arms dealing is mentioned. But it's all in a thread of humanness dressed in colorful sarcasm, I found, which I thought was the life of the book. The colorful sarcasm, which does not allow us to dwell on the gory and the sordid details is the strength of the book. It lets us go forward, move forward in a positive way. I would like to quote a couple of things which I think sparkled, in my mind, and it's going to be staying there for some time. Quote, one good thing about a bomb is that it isn't racist or sexist. Unquote. Quote, spirit of suicides crowded onto a rooftop ledge of a hotel, jumping off with a glee of toddlers. Unquote. Truth sets you free, but not in Sri Lanka. I mean, these are really hard-hitting ones, And there's another one which I really liked was in 1983, we didn't think to get organized. We were too stunned. These days, people are angrier, especially when they die. Unquote. The author aligns himself beautifully with the readers where thoughts and perspectives are concerned. I felt very much one with the book and the story. To me, reading this book has been a cleansing process, a journey within myself to see different aspects of our living, our existence, our relationships, our personal insecurities, our professional and personal intrigues, political intrigues, traps, and the moral dilemmas each one poses. A clever manipulation of extremes, a very tactful juxtaposition of sublime with the mundane. I would loudly applause, give a loud applause to the author for a very ingenious way of dealing with a very intrinsic part of everyone's life, which is this and the other world, I love the book and thank you so much.
Thank you, Anju. That is so buoyant, and that sort of takes us out of this world to a much more universal way in which we look at life and death, in which we look at the colonizer and colonized within our new decolonized nations. Beautifully put on so many accounts. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So after this 83, 89, 90s executions, there were a whole slew of videos that were made of the killings by the Sri Lankan army, by the different factions against each other. But long before that, about 100 years before that, at least 80 years before that, Pablo Neruda, who was a consul in what was then Ceylon, I think 1927 to 1929 were his years. He wrote this amazing poem. And what is interesting is how this poem has gone viral all the way to Australia. So I'll read you the lines. All that has been talked about in the last 40 minutes. Neruda says, and I quote, between the coconut palms, the graves are full of ruined bones, of speechless death rattles, the dead voices, the blue mouths freshly buried. This was found by a professor in Australia, Western Australia, Surendrini Pereira, very well-known scholar, where she wrote when she found this scribbled on the bathroom door of a women's bathroom in her university. She says, what was going through her mind? The young student who carefully reproduced the 20 or so lines of a poem, word for word, standing in the unquiet anonymity of a toilet stall? And is it the one place she feels free from observation? It is as if someone coldly wills herself there in a field of mud and coconut palms. Did the student's nostrils swell as she wrote, filling unbearably with that mix of blood and body, a penetrating petal that brings nausea? There are many places, too many to enumerate, poisoned by the penetrating petal that betrays the pervasive, unspoken presence of hidden graves. but Lankans make special claims on Neruda, Chile's consul in Ceylon, as I said, from 1927 to 29. Very similarly, we see that Michael Ondaatje, in his collection Handwriting, in the poem The Distance of a Shout, he says, and I quote, "Monks from the north came down our streams floating. Monks from the north came down our streets, our streams floating. That was the year no one ate river fish. There was no book of the forest, no book of the sea. But these are the places people died. Handwriting occurred on waves, on leaves, the scripts of smoke, a sign on a bridge along the Mahaveli River, a gradual acceptance of this new language. No book, no map, but an ephemeral tracing by voice or hand registers the places where people died." In my opinion, Ondaatje's poem is contemporaneous with his novel Anil's Ghost and with this novel by Shehan Karunatilaka, the war-ravaged 1990s. In Anil's Ghost, written in 2000, and now 22 years later, written by Shehan Karunatilaka. Something to think about. We ate no fish because the fish gorged on the humans. The fish changed their diet because of the civil war that has gone on for so long in Sri Lanka. I suppose writers such as Shehan Karunatilaka, Michael Ondaatje, they find a way in which to give us images of death in the most surreal, in the most real, in the most magical way, and in the context of the paradigm of the comic. You can almost laugh and cry at the same time at the enormity of fish gorging on human flesh. I would like to turn to Dr. Jean Carroll Ewart, always very perceptive in the way that she looks at literature. She's from the University of Florida and a regular at our book club. Welcome, Jean. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Julie. It is such a great pleasure to be here, and it was so overwhelming to read this book. You know, I think Americans have no idea what happened in Sri Lanka for the last 30 years. I even work with Sri Lanka because I write about Michael Ondaatje, and I had no idea. Of course, his time period is prior to the Civil War. Running in the Family only comes up to the first years of it, and Anil's Ghost deals with kind of a retrospective for information he doesn't really have. But as I read The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida, I kept thinking about how different Ondaatje's perspective as a burgher is, and as someone who's completely nostalgic for a childhood that he cannot get back. He was 10 when he left Sri Lanka. And how he completely occluded the experiences of really most Tamils and Sinhalese, aside from claiming that his own father was part Tamil, something I think that has not actually been substantiated, but I don't know. But as I read, I remembered this passage in Running in the Family. It's in the chapter that's called Tabula Asiae. And about the false maps that Europeans made because they went by in sailing ships and didn't understand it. And at the end of that passage, Ondaatje says, "The maps reveal rumors of topography, the routes for invasion and trade, and the dark mad mind of travelers' tales appears throughout Arab, Chinese, and medieval records. The island," this is the word I'm looking for, "the island seduced all of Europe, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the English. And so its name changed, and he goes through a list of all the names. The wife of many marriages, courted by invaders who stepped ashore and claimed everything with the power of their sword or a Bible or a language. I used to teach this passage and say to my students, what kind of courtship is it that comes with a sword? You know, how consensual is that courtship? And then when I read the 7 Moons of Maali Almeida, I marked this passage. I don't know if everybody has the same edition. It's on page 260 in mine. And it says, the Portuguese assumed the missionary position. The Dutch took us from behind. By the time the Brits came along, we were already on our knees with our hands behind our backs and our mouths open. And it seems to me that that passage is a direct response to Ondaatje's claim of seduction and courtship. And I thought it was very powerful the way he expressed that. And then there's a list of things you would rather be colonized by. Maali says, I'm glad we were colonized by the British. And the person he's speaking to, the dead priest, says, better than being slaughtered by the French or enslaved by the Belgians or gassed by the Germans or raped by the Spaniards. And I thought, what a brutal history of colonialism that you would rather have had it been the Dutch or the Portuguese than any of these other people. And I grew up in Belgian Congo, and I can say that that is categorically true. You know, the catalog of brutality shouldn't preclude the possibility of not colonizing, of not having that happen at all. So I could not independently evaluate or verify the historicity of the text because I just am so ignorant. But I found the narrative so compelling, so beautifully explicated, so narratively interesting. It reminded me more than anything else of another book I read recently about the life of the dead, George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo, which also has an interesting view of the afterlife and conversations among the dead and not departed. But that's really what I want to say about it, is I will have to do so much thinking about this book, which moved me so deeply and which I do not understand. Thank you.
Well, it seems like sometimes, Jean, we have so much of the understanding within us, but it is so magisterial that it's difficult to articulate it in terms that we understand, right?
This is a book that I would need to teach for 20 years before I thought I was understanding it.
It's funny that you should invoke Lincoln in the Bardo, because this is what Shehan said the day before yesterday. And he invoked Lincoln in the Bardo, and he said, I was nervous when I saw this book. And I said, they're not going to give a booker to a person who's talking about the same theme, which is speaking with the dead, or the dead speaking to us, you know. But he proved them wrong.
He proved them wrong, and they are very, very different books. You know, the speaking with the dead is what they have in common.
Yes.
But Lincoln in the Bardo has a completely different project.
Yes, absolutely. I want to pick up on the issue of colonialism and how the new colonialism is working in states. And I think many of you have, several of you, and I'm thinking of Anusuya here, who just gave us an explication, a brilliant explication of the fringes and how the book devastates us with the way it deals with different layers and textures of the marginalized, of LGBTQ issues, of divisive politics, and the like. So Anusuya, you've lived in South Africa. Jean has lived in the Belgian Congo, as she says. So many of us have lived in places which are embattled zones. I want to turn my attention for the moment to Parthiban. Parthi, when you were leaving Sri Lanka with your parents in that absolute frenzy of having to leave your homeland, how old were you and what was it like?
I actually left, interestingly, during the ceasefire. That was around 2003, and it was around, I was 14 years old, and I left. And in a way, I have to say maybe I was lucky, because I think the years following were much more brutal and unforgiving for whomever it may be, especially in the North and the East. So yeah, for me, I think my experience might be slightly different than a person who might have been living in Sri Lanka in the later years, and not just going through that horrific events, but also when it's all done, to process all that happened over the last 20 years. For example, my generation, that was a significant part of our lives, where something was happening in the North and the East, which we can't seem to comprehend what it was. So, yeah.
Karthi, do you remember, I think it was 2008, and we discussed running in the family in our class on Asian cultures. And then I was teaching the entire Michael Ondaatje fiction, and your colleagues, Ticklin, Martin, and I think Nivetika were in that class, and we were having tremendous amount of stress and tension between the Anglo-Canadian students and the Sri Lankan students, because 2008, there was a big massacre up in Jaffna. And some of the Sri Lankan students in that Scarborough campus of University of Toronto had lost any contact with their family. So what happens to the diaspora? What happens to the next generation or your generation in the diaspora who have, and I'm also thinking of Shyam Selvadurai, who came earlier than you did. And it was almost at, that there was no choice. There was no second thoughts. You just got on that plane, and by God's grace, you were going to get away. So with that kind of urgency or immediacy, what happens to your sense of belonging or identity or your idea of home? How do you feel about your connectedness when you see these frames and images on social media, on the internet, on the news? What does it do to you?
So I look at my generation here, who sometimes they were even born here,
Yes.
but the trauma kind of transcends from their parents to them.
Yes.
And they seem to have, even though they know they're Tamil, most of the people who migrated were Tamil, and most of the people who are in Canada are Tamil, who migrated during the Civil War. There is, I think, it's still a sense of an unsettling feeling about who we are, where do we belong, because Sri Lanka for them is not a land that they associated with, even though the part of Sri Lanka that their families are from is kind of stuck together. So it's kind of like, for example, if a cricket team wins, do we cheer for it? Do we not? If there's a Tamil person in the cricket team, do we cheer for him or do we not? If an Indian movie per se was made about a Sri Lankan person or a Sri Lankan actor is involved in it, do we cheer for him or do we not? There's a conflict, constant conflict within yourself of a sense of identity. And even when last year's whole protests were going on, I think a lot of the people in my generation were kind of almost finding it comical that, hey, this is what we were doing. For example, I think 2008 was in Toronto, where there was a big protest here for the war, against the war.
Yes.
This is what we were doing, but no one cared. No one's going to care you again anyway. So this doesn't make any sense. So I feel until, this is what they say, I don't know what the truth is again, until a sense of justice in certain way, I don't know if that's even possible or if it's going to be just forgotten. I don't know if there's a way to reconcile, to feel a sense of home, and this is who we are, this is where we are from. And I think that's maybe also ties back to his Shehan's point of being in between.
Yes.
What is home? Because your home is very unsettling. So where you are, where are you? So that is my view.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because if you recall the discussions post that 2008 trauma, and you dealing with it, your generation dealing with it, when you couldn't get in touch with your families, with your grandparents in Jaffna, because the phone lines had all been cut and you didn't even know if they were alive or not. The Anglo-Canadian students found it difficult to understand that, because they felt, I remember these words, Parthi, why don't you take your baggage and go right back? Don't bring your baggage here to a new homeland. And that is so difficult, because you are a part of this and you're also a part of that.
Yeah.
So with that, I think it's a good place to open it up to a discussion on how the homeland, the dismemberment of the homeland, the cutting to pieces of parts of the homeland, which really was, and Jean Carroll, you had hit it on the head when she talked about the colonial enterprise, because the colonial enterprise was very simple. Excuse me, Shemonti, can we please mute? Can we mute everyone who's not speaking? So the important thing I think here is to remember that in Anil's Ghost, we see this dismemberment with the skeletons, that the 4 skeletons that Anil Tissera comes as a forensic archaeologist to examine. And she works with another forensic archaeologist. And I'd like to ask Raka Mukherjee, who can't be here with us, but I think her co-scholar, Harsh Kumar Singh, who's also a graduate student, very bright. Harsh, could you talk a little bit about how we can juxtapose this idea of the body and why the body becomes the center of the discourse, as Professor Chaitali Moitro also invoked earlier on in our discussion. Go ahead, Harsh.
Hi, ma'am. I'm here, but I'm not being able to speak. I have actually given Harsh a write-up. It actually ties up all my arguments.
That's fine. You can give it to him, Raka.
Yeah,
No
he has it. He'll read it. But to answer this question, I would like to take it up while he reads it, and then specifically answer this.
Okay, that will be fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Raka.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, thank you. You are absolutely audible. Go ahead.
Okay. So here I'll be taking up from what Raka has written. So it was The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida by Shehan Karunetilak takes an interesting viewpoint on the Sri Lankan civil war from the afterlife of the eponymous queer photographer. So the narrator is basically addressing the reader in second person, placing them in the shoes of the stole stuck in the waiting room that the author calls the in-between, which is a very interesting idea, I find. And it's set on the timer of 7 moons, 7 days. The novel is very, it's a very atypical whodunit, which is peppered with many gory images of corpses, bodies, blood, with a background of all kinds of war crimes. this symbolic use of the in-between as a liminal space is very interesting, as the idea of the Maali, firstly due to his hyphenated identity within the Sri Lankan community with his Sinhalese absent father and half Burgher, half Tamil mother.
Harsh, very sorry, I just got a message. You can't be heard. Can you speak a little louder? Can everyone hear, guys? Is everyone able to hear?
Yes.
Okay, so shall I be a little louder?
Yes, thank you, Harsh.
All right. So Maali is a conflict zone photojournalist, and he's known to engage in sexual encounters with attractive men. In 1990 Sri Lanka, any of these activities could have been his undoing, could have been slain for unpaid gambling debts by his clandestine yet intensely envious partner Didi, or by any of the nation's belligerent forces, the Tamil Tigers, the communist JVP, or the government in its endeavor to eradicate the factions and carelessly apprehending the innocent, all of whom he had photographed at some point. And with the two guides that accompany his afterlife, Rani, slain Tamil moderate, whose call for adhering to the regulations and venturing towards the light is met with resistance from Sena, another JVP activist who disappears at the hands of the state. So Sena is basically proffering the framework that Rani represents as a means of bourgeois control. And instead of relinquishing one's past to start anew, one should seek retribution against their murderers. So naturally, the protagonist here, as we know, chooses the latter's advice and decides to make sure that his former secret lover, Didi, and supposed girlfriend, Jackie, are led to his prized photographs that could expose and topple governments. The photographic evidence, and here I would like to bring, as Raka has brought in, Susan Sontag's concept of soft murder. Okay, that makes Maali's lens, both in the human life and afterlife, a violation of the corpses tainted with war crimes, and along with the metaphorical murder of the perpetrators whose faces are exposed. Karunatilak has weaved a tale of recurrent tumult in which the living and the dead are both entangled in a cycle of seemingly endless internecine strife. Everywhere Maali goes, he encounters the spirit of those slain or missing, still here to lament their misfortune or to vent their unresolved sorrow. Sena looks to capitalize on this, luring them with promises of retribution and leverage. Other specters have their own designs. The country's debauched, blood-soaked defense minister has been safeguarded from numerous assassination attempts by the spirit of a dead bodyguard, who has provided protection to a string of insignificant leaders since his own death. The ever-present danger of Mahakali, a frightful being devours unguided apparitions, whose first stirrings of existence can be traced back to a single act of violence that stretches back through time. Karunatilak's sardonic and acerbic narrative somehow conveys many such aspects of the tale, including the wraiths of Tamil combatants who find the afterlife preferable since no one orders them around, and the souls of the plane crash victims who elected to remain in the spirit. And as ma'am, you had correctly compared with, the novel can be compared with Ondaatje's Anil's Ghost, because Anil and Sarat's excavation, because as Sarat dies in Anil's ghost and Maali wakes up dead in the afterlife, the silencing of uncovering, presenting evidence on war crimes is a common trope in both the books. Although Ondaatje takes the way of Buddhist teachings through the artist Anand, who performs the Netra Mangala, or painting the statue of the Buddha awakening of the third eye. It's a metaphorical description of how knowledge or uncovering crimes of the war may lead to death or enlightenment in afterlife. And similarly, in the Seven Moons of Maali Almeida, the narrator leaves the reader in Maali's shoes. The descriptions evoke the idea of the abject. The photographic evidence is both voyeuristic and frightening at the same time. One can argue that Karunatilak's language is gory, but he tries to paint the exact picture without any euphemism. And the silencing of voices that expose the powerful people of their war crimes, and Maali as the ironic ghost from the past of Sri Lankan war, is an echo of the tolerance and subservience in turning a blind eye to gory details of crimes in civil war, which the author bravely presents, invoking abject and discomfort for all its readers. And that's all. Ma'am, you're on mute.
Thank you, Harsh. So with that wonderful, introductory explication, shall we have Raka's views on the body and the bodyscape?
Ma'am, I'll answer this because Harsh is not prepared for this.
Yes, go ahead.
So I apologize for my voice being so.
No problem.
Yeah, so if we talk about the bodyscape as we read the chapters in Maali Almeida, I think the images and the very images that are connecting with urine, with excreta, with genitalia, all of this is actually a metaphorical way to describe how these lives are wasted. The mutilation of the body reminds me of Coetze, and reminds me of the violation of I think Zizek, Slavoj Zizek, who says that, the power of these people of silencing the radical voices is by hate crimes through mutilation of the body. If the dead body is decapitated, for example, we know that Maali's head was decapitated and thrown into the river. This is because you will be silenced, you will be disappeared, as in the novel Shehan Karnatilaka mentions, because if you are going against the state, even in the afterlife, if you are choosing to go back and excavate what you have left to expose these people, the mutilation of the body is the mutilation of the motherland, or the possession of the motherland. The body of the mutilated corpse is perhaps the heap of dead bodies on which new colonized homeland is built. And some, as you said, manage to flee, but the ones who are buried under, the ones who are burned, decapitated, raped, and mutilated, those images are very important, because although you might feel pukish, you might feel abject reading them, but those are the truths that lie beneath the soil that you're living on.
Wonderful. Raka, I'm just going to stop you for 1 second and respond to this, excellent buried version of the body, which we don't really talk about so much. If any of you remember, the idea of biopolitics, which is what Raka's really talking about, we didn't know then that the 71 insurgency was only a grim prelude of the bloodletting that began, or I could even say inaugurated, an era of terror. So Akili Mbembe, talks about necropolitics. I think it's very important for us to just expand the idea of the body. Necropolitics to do with the politics of death and the body, and you layer it, Raka, to what you're talking about, Michel Foucault's idea of biopolitics. So while Foucault points out that in medieval times, power, sovereign power of the king was manifested through the king's prerogative to take life, in our times, sovereignty is exercised through the management of life by different factions who have firepower. And Mbembe questions whether this biopolitics is sufficient to account for the contemporary ways in which the political, under the guise of war, is actually performing the killings on the body. So it prompts us, I think, in a way, to reflect on the theater of war, the theater of the maimed body, the excreta, the urine that you so evocatively invoked, and the idea of the desecration of the human body, which actually parallels the desecration of the human spirit. I think if you read it against that and what you've said, the novel adds to our understanding of why Shehan Karunatilaka has taken the baton from people such as Ondaatje, stood on the shoulders of Ondaatje, and perhaps taken the race even further. So would you have any more to add to that idea, Raka? I think I stopped you somewhere.
Yeah, I would just add one little comparison. We did 10 minutes, 38 seconds in The
Yes.
Strange World by Elif Shafak. And even there were a lot of images of discarded body, of the body being, because the protagonist's body was raped and then murdered and thrown into the trash can. So
Yes.
the idea of garbage, the idea of trash, that keeps coming back into all these. And to notice, even Maali Almeida's identity is hyphenated. The protagonist in Elif Shafak's book, even her identity was hyphenated. What we see is you cannot, if you do not belong with the political majority, you are waste, you are discarded. That is how we can, come to the conclusion of why
Brilliant.
these images are used.
Brilliant, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Harsh, for your part of the performance, as we say. Thank you. So if I might call upon Professor Ripandi Lepcha, are you here, Professor? Yes, please.
ma'am.
Would love to hear you. Go ahead. Go ahead. All the way from Darjeeling.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Julie ma'am, again for inviting me to this beautiful, wonderful event. It's so knowledgeable and enlightening to me always. So what I have taken from this particular text that we are reading and discussing about today is basically, the religious part of it, and especially death. So while reading this particular text, the first thing that actually, when I read it, when I started the text, the lines, "Father, forgive them, for I will never." And that struck me because from life, that particular trauma, that particular hatred, this anger, this angst has been carried to the other side of the world as well, to the other realm, the realm of the dead. And then this particular statement, it made me question whether we carry all of these even after we die. And then, while reading the text, what I realized is, when we live on this earth, we kind of, look at where the situations in the world, everything in the world with maybe rose-tinted glasses and overlook certain things, like we are, we blindside certain things. But then again, in that, after we die, in the afterlife, or let us call the valley of the shadow of death, everything is brutally honest. Nobody can lie, or we cannot look at things and situations through rose-colored glasses. So that is what I realized. And then the experience of Maali Almeida, that particular experience, I would like to kind of call it as the valley of the shadow of death experience. And is that what every person experiences? After life, that means in death, and in the other realm. And then the other thing that actually kind of hits me the most is in this particular like this particular zone, in this particular realm, in this particular space, like this particular character is telling the truth about what happened in that particular world, though like he knows about it, he has seen everything in this particular world, and then he's trying to tell the truth, he's trying to meet those people in order to like kind of debunk the truth. One thing is like, yeah, and then there's this hope even at the end where he talks about the light. Can these people, the people of the other worlds, the people belonging to the other world, will they be able to go back and then tell the truth? And this again reminded me of one story in the Bible, where there's this particular story about the rich man and Lazarus, where the rich man from the inferno or hell calls unto Abram and says, why don't you go to the world and then tell my brothers and sisters about this thing? Or because tell them that there is a heaven and then there is a hell. And then this particular, the Abraham, he replies and says, now there is Moses and the prophets that they've got to believe that. Now in that means that particular person who is already in inferno cannot go back to the land of the living and talk about that. And that kind of it hit me the most, and it was so it was like kind of it was kind of a heartbreaking situation for me, because like here, though the character is trying to like portray it, like we the living people through that particular text are reading about what that particular character is trying to convey, yet will that particular message go and spread across in the land of the living? That is my question. And that is the thing, but because he is living while living that particular valley, that particular zone or the realm of the shadow of death, he is experiencing every other emotion, because the book of memories are opened, and whatever we as people in the land of the living are trying to forget, we the people in the land of the dead, they cannot forget at all. The book of the memories are opened. So though that this is a book and this is a novel and this is a character written by like Shashank Karunatilaka, yet it evokes in us a question, like are we ready for that particular realm? What are we doing about it? Are we ready to like kind of make amends about whether it is a political or spiritual or a religious amends, whatever it is? But are we willing to do that? Are we willing to take that particular step? Because when we move on to the other side, it's very difficult to come back to the land of the living and to come back to the land of the living and make that change and then live that life again. So that is what I like could collect from this particular text.
Wow,
so thank you.
That was a wonderful juxtaposition. As you said, when the book of memories is open, when you've crossed over to the other side and you see how your life has taken place and you want to convey that to the other side, but there's a barrier there. Ripandi, we can't hear them. Wow, that is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Shreyoshi Das Roy, another very bright, brilliant graduate student. Are you here?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. Good evening, but unfortunately, I won't be able to use my front camera. It's not working for some reason.
No problem. Go ahead.
So, ma'am, I'll be honest, due to the examinations which are going on, I haven't been able to finish it. But from what I've understood and from how much I've read, I think what's really interesting is the way in which the author uses humor while talking about something which is so gory, which has been traditionally considered to be sacred and not something which should be taken lightly. This is the kind of book which, again, I haven't ever come across any other writer writing about the chat with the dead and also involving political context in such depth and detail while putting it across an individual's ups and downs. The characters, I would say, are very interesting, and certain words and certain phrases which I've actually highlighted, I think they are acting as, I would not say precursors, but rather they are markers of the author trying to tell in his way how life actually is without sugarcoating it. So for example, I've just highlighted certain phrases, certain sentences. One of them is this from my edition is page 13, and it says most political murders have nothing to do with politics. This is an eye-opener, definitely, when you are about to read something, when the author is about to present something to you with a particular thing in his mind, and he gives this flashlight that, hey, you have to look at it in this way. What all you see, you cannot take everything at face value. You have to look at it from different perspectives. And I think the fact that he's brought in the entire sphere of communicating with those who are dead, those who have already experienced it, it is his way of saying that whatever we see in front of us, it is not to be taken in a singular manner. So when you are going to look at something, when you are thinking about something or analyzing something, there is always the other side, and the other side over here becomes those who have passed on to the other side, and they are actually trying to communicate to the side from which they have come. And it's interesting the way in which the author, and he's the second Sri Lankan author I've read. The previous one is the one who, I'm forgetting the name, the one who wrote Reef. And this is,
yeah,
right, ma'am. And this is a completely different way, a different strategy of talking about something, the Sri Lankan entire geopolitics and how it has affected the individual. And it's something which I would say people nowadays through literature, they are definitely trying to make others aware of the fact that this is not something which can always be kept away. People can't always shy away from this, that you have to, at some point or the other, you have to confront it. And when you are confronting it, you will see how your individual life, your individual existence has in different multiple ways been affected by those external factors.
Excellent.
And this is what I can explicate from this read.
Thank you. Thank you, Shreyashi. That was very helpful. And it rhymed and chimed beautifully with what Professor Ripandi Lepcha just told us, of our understanding of that, going across. And then there is just so much of ancient literature that comes to mind, whether you're thinking of the river Leith, whether you're thinking of crossing over, the Greek idea of the boatman that you have to pay with 2 silver coins for the eyes of the person crossing over to the other side. Wonderful. Professor Chris Marsh, Christine, is there anything you would like to add to today's discussion?
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yes, this is a simplistic view of what's been said, but it's my view. It's a very personal thing. I was particularly struck by what Parthy said about identity, because I am an atheist environmentalist, passionate about the planet. In my terms, in a crude way, in a simplistic way, the only identities that exist are 2. The individual person who has a life and dies, and then they're gone. And the other identity is the planet and our species in relationship to the planet, which we are destroying. I mean, that is something that is recognized, I think, at some level by all of us. So these other identities that are portrayed in this wonderful novel, because although I'm an atheist environmentalist, I still enjoy reading novels, and the enjoyment is one of the many distractions from dealing with the crisis that we're in, that our species may not survive because of what we're doing to the planet. There are so many distractions, and in some ways, this book describes quite a lot of them. You have the victims of persecution, the victims of neglect, the victims of tribalism and ill treatment of various kinds. You know, this is vividly portrayed. As well as that, there are all these people who are just about surviving in the world that we live in, trying to make a living. And in some ways, that identity is missing from the book. He dramatizes the victims, the perpetrators, the heroes, the ones that want to be the whistleblowers and tell the world what's happening. He has so many identities, but that whole picture, from my point of view as an atheist environmentalist, is one of the many distractions which takes us away from the job that I feel we have to do, which is addressing the crisis, the climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, and what's happening. And I mean, that's I always feel I'm sort of barging in with this because it's not relevant to this, you know, wonderful depth of studies of literature, which I admire, and you know what people have said, highly intelligent, wonderful stuff. But at one level, I'm saying, no, forget about that. Let's save the planet.
Yeah. I think the point is well made, well taken, and you've just added on yet another vision, through another lens through which we can view this novel. So thank you so much, Professor Marsh. And the environment is certainly a concern from the point of view at how we are desecrating, destroying, and completely annihilating. The point about the Anthropocene is so well made by you. Thank you so much. I'd like to invite Professor Isobel. Are you around, Professor Brito? Isabel, are you there? Possibly not. Anyone else want to chip in and say a few words? This is the time before we wrap up.
Julie, if I may.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So I just, since we are all reading different books, and I was in the process of reading The Hidden Forces of the World. This is a compilation of various writings by Rishi Aurobindo and the mother of Aurobindo Ashram. So why I had to connect the dots between what Sheshan wrote and what I was reading from Rishi Aurobindo is about forces particularly, and how forces impact all our lives. And we go through life with a certain comfort in the thought that, you know, there is a benign force and justice will prevail, and all the good that I have done will be recognized and recorded, and I'll have a good afterlife. However, when you read Rishi Aurobindo, and he is a man who's known for his wisdom and his deep insight into the the very origin of the cosmos. And they both write about the forces that prevail around us and how they can be equally divine as well as devastating. And one very curious fact which came out from reading that, and it was so strange that I should be reading this book, picked up this book when I was reading this part in Rishi Aurobindo's writings, was about the fact that there are these negative forces that kind of invest themselves in a host. And they bring about the worst of reactions from the host, and they actually revel in watching the destruction of the host, and it is pure entertainment. And not just that, they go on to talk, mother in fact talks a lot about what had happened with Hitler. and how he was invested with negative ideas, which grew and festered on itself, and it had so many hosts, to nourish itself with. So at all times, you then wonder, I mean, it's just pure luck if you can just kind of steer clear of these negative forces and manage to somehow keep your head above the water.
Yeah.
And when you read this book, it is quite frightening that the state of Sri Lanka is just not able to come out of it. If we go into history and see the bloodletting that happened during Ashoka's time and what made him, as the head of the nation, take a stance towards no more bloodletting, I mean, that's about the only thing that is there now left for Sri Lanka, some organic growth of some person who takes it upon himself or herself to steer this nation out of this recurring bloodletting.
And if I might say so, Anasuya, with Parthi right here, God help that person. Really, the Lord help that person. Because there are a zillion forces, as you yourself have pointed out, who will try to stop that positive force from excelling. So, we can just hope that some assertive and a powerful force will emerge from this. So thank you for that, everyone. Parthi, really enjoyed your nuggets, and thank you so much for being here and for reading the book and for sharing. What can I say? This is such a treat every month. So the next month, we have something which Professor Chris Marsh will revel in, I think, and it's called Hallelujah for Every Leaf. It's a book by the Nigerian British author whom I absolutely adore. Many of us do. And it's Ben Okri's newest book, Hallelujah for Every Leaf. And it talks about exactly what Professor Marsh has told us about the planet. So it's a tiny little book, and it would make all of us very happy. I think, Jean, did you receive a copy of the PDF I sent? Do you remember, or should I send it again?
Can you remind me which one? You've sent me several things. Which one are we talking about? Ben
Okri's Hallelujah for Every Leaf.
Oh, I didn't receive the PDF, but, or maybe I did and didn't. The library owns a copy.
Okay.
So
wonderful.
I do have access to it. Thank you.
So 21st of February, 6 o'clock India time. I look forward to seeing you all, and I'll make sure that I send you all a PDF in any case. Parthi, once again, thank you, Jean, Shreyoshi, Anasuya, Anju, Professor Marsh, everyone here, Harsh and Choitali, Anasuya, thank you everyone, Shamlu, Raka, Vibha, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
the
Bye.
enormous.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shebonti.
Thank you, Julie. This is Indrani from Madras signing off. Wonderful
lovely.
Evening. Wonderful.
Lovely. Lovely.
Thank you so much.
I hope we'll see you again. And next time, do say a few words. Do say a few words.
Every time. And I do miss being at the Bengal Club. I mean, it's so special to us. And, I really miss being back in Calcutta. But definitely we'll be there. Thank you so much.
Please do.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye for now. Choitali, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye, Shebonti. Excellent job. Excellent job. Choitali, bye-bye. See you later.